All right, and we're live. Welcome everyone once again for an episode of the Living Better podcast. And today we are with Dick Harbers. He's a NLP master practitioner and the creator of quantum healing process. And we're going to talk about what is NLP, how does it help people, and what Dick offers in terms of services, and a little bit more about him and stories of success as well, which I always like to ask. So Dick, thanks for being on the show. Let's talk a bit about you and how you came to become an NLP master practitioner and creating the system that you're using. And what is NLP? So let's dive into that.
Well, there's a bunch of questions there. So
One at a time.
We'll tick them off one at a time. But first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. And you actually found me, in a sense, by interviewing someone who had already been through my process, right?
Okay.
And you watched her interview of me, which was fascinating, because it's amazing how the internet works that way. It's a really connective process.
Yes.
So thanks for that. And how I came into NLP is quite a long story, so I'm not sure I want to go into all the detail. But essentially, a bit like most people, you go through some sort of life trauma. Before that, you're sort of bubbling along and you're doing your things. And I got to the level of being a school principal and everything was fine. Then something happened in my marriage that blew my world apart, right? Because I came from a Christian tradition. And in the Christian tradition that I grew up in, marriage is till death us do part. And for all sorts of reasons, which I won't go into, but my wife of 4 years decided that our relationship was not serving her. Not that I was violent or anything like that. The reality was I was emotionally unavailable to her. Right? Okay. I didn't know that, of course, because I was just being me.
Yeah.
Right. And so she decided she needed to go and find that somewhere else. Okay. Now, when you have this mindset, this worldview that marriage is till death us do part, and your wife leaves, you think, well, why aren't I dead? Right? Yeah. So that whole thing. I mean, we're still good friends. Not that I've been in contact recently, but we parted quite amicably because I also realised that I don't own my marriage partner. It's not that we don't own people. We choose to be together through choice. And we can only really be together through choice, clear choice on both parties, when both parties are deciding that freely of their own free will. And therefore, they also have the free will to say, this is not serving me. Time to go. So even back then, when I was in that sort of emotionally unattainable phase or state of my life, I still recognized that autonomy she had. Right? Even though it blew my world apart. But in hindsight, it's probably one of the best things that happened to me, because otherwise I would have pottled on and probably ended up at my age now wondering what happened, where did my life go, right? So anyway, so in my journey of of getting into that trauma, that emotional trauma, wasn't a physical trauma. I started exploring. First of all, I resigned from teaching straight away because I knew I didn't want to put on the children I was teaching my emotional traumas, my emotional upset, my emotional upheaval. And I made very clear to them and the other teachers of the school that this was none of their doing. It's nothing to do with them. I had to go through my own personal journey. So then I went through many, many things. And eventually I came to a particular program, was called a Life Transformation Program, and taught in Sydney. I was just a participant. And in that particular program, they taught a specific NLP technique to us, which in hindsight now wasn't taught particularly well. But the interesting thing was we had a little process to do called reframing, and that's a particular NLP technique. And we did the exercise. They gave us basically the instructions on a sheet of paper with almost like a template of the things you had to say. And also doing an example to show us what to do. And we had to move into groups of 3 and take it in turns to being the facilitator or the therapist, the client, and the observer. Right. So when it was my turn to be the therapist, my client was a lovely young lady whose desire was to lose weight by eating less. Now, from my male perspective, she didn't need to lose weight at all, but everybody has their own thing that they want to do. So, and this was on a Sunday evening of a weekend workshop, and our next meeting was Wednesday during the midweek. Anyway, so, and it was the last part of the Sunday evening. So anyway, I sat there and read off the template, the words I had to say, and put the losing weight by eating less in the spaces in the template, right? But I was sort of, you're fumbling and you're reading, you're looking up and you're fumbling and you're reading, wasn't particularly smooth or anything like that. And when we'd finished, it was time for the evening to finish. And so I said to Susie, I'll see you on Wednesday and I'll see what happened. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't remember what I did when I was a client or what I did as the observer. I just remember that particular part of the process because it was like seared in my memory. Anyway, on Wednesday we come and I said, hi, Susie, how's it going? And she said, Dick, I haven't eaten anything for 3 days.
My God.
Exactly. And she said, please undo what you did. I said, they didn't teach us how to undo what we did. I said, well, let's do it backwards and see what happens.
Okay.
Being creative thinking. And having taught, for 14 years, I had some skills in, making decisions on the run, on the fly, so to speak, flying by the seat of your pants. So I did what I did backwards. I can't remember how I did what I did backwards, but I did it. And that was early on the Wednesday evening. And, you don't know what the results are till you actually see it in real life, of course. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so at the end of the evening, we went down to the local coffee shop to have a cup of coffee and a cake, and she had the cup of coffee and a cake. And she was back to eating normally. And I looked at her and she looked at me and we both said, wow. Here I had to change the person's automatic eating behaviors to a different automatic eating behavior, mm-hmm. having no idea how I did what I did except by a simple template on a piece of paper. I thought, this is amazing. I mean, if I can do that without really understanding what I'm doing, just by following a particular process, mm-hmm. that I didn't even understand why I said the words I did. And it works so powerfully. I want to learn this. Yeah. I want to know how to do this. So luckily for me, I discovered an NLP training in the fairly soon future, a couple of months away.
Yeah.
I managed to convince my boss that, and I was working in a government department at the time, so would you mind paying for this training? Because I'll learn lots of good stuff I can use at work. Mm-hmm. He said, well, only if you promise to give us a bit of a rundown when you come back and maybe do a class or two with some of the staff. I said, yeah, that's fine. I'll do that. Mm-hmm. So he paid for it, which is great. Anyway, nice. And so that was the trainer in that program. This was in Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. She mm-hmm. was very good, but she was a trainee trainer. So she wasn't the main trainer, but she was very good. And she only did the first half of that program. It was a 7-day program every day for 7 days.
And would you mind just saying what NLP is? It's Neuro-Linguistic programming. So before we go any further, for our audience to understand what it is exactly that we're talking about when we say NLP.
Good point. Mm-hmm. NLP stands for Neural or Neuro-Linguistic Programming, which basically says your neurons are programmed by your language. So that's why I work with this woman. By my language, I reprogrammed her neurology and therefore her behavior. But also when we listen to our language, or I'm listening to a client's language, I'm listening to the programming that is already there, listening for that. Mm-hmm. So I can hear what programs are running subconsciously by the words they speak and recognizing which programs are probably not very functional and which programs are functional, because we've got a whole bunch of programs in there. And one example of a program is a belief we might have about life, about ourselves. Oh, I can't do that. That's a belief. It's not necessarily true at all. Just because we believe something to be true doesn't mean it is true. Right. Anyway, so at this program of Neuro-NLP program that I was going to, I discovered something else fascinating. She taught the reframing process much better, right? And in a properly skilled process. Mm-hmm. And what was interesting is after she taught that, the next day, and you sort of, when you're learning, you're sort of practicing and doing exercise and all that sort of stuff. And of course, you're thinking about all this and sort of coming to realizations as you go. So walking back from lunch one time along the pathway, I came to realize that I had had chronic anxiety state for years.
Okay.
Never formally diagnosed, but I experienced that through this negative internal dialogue, not debilitating most of the time, but certainly noticeable. And also as butterflies in the stomach, pretty well constantly. And sometimes a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. There's the 3 ways I noticed that. Right? But that's just how it was. So I didn't know that could be any different. Okay. But I had this for years. Anyway, walking back from lunch, I was walking along a path and I was sort of in a daydreamy state. And I thought to myself, before I go to this story, one of the precepts of NLP is that everything in our system has positive intentions. Right? So I realized my chronic anxiety state probably had positive intentions. Doesn't feel like it when you're experiencing it.
Yeah.
But and the other thing we discovered is that every cell in your body, and I learned that in a previous reading before NLP, responds to your thoughts. That's very clearly established. Mm-hmm. So if your cells respond to your thoughts, that means your organs and tissues and everything else responds to your thoughts. Right? So I was walking along the path and I suddenly said to myself, I said, my conscious mind said to my chronic anxiety state, I said, "Hi guys, what are you doing down there?" Now guys with a butterfly in my tummy. Right? "Hi guys, what are you doing down there?" And the thought came straight back, "We're looking after you." I said, "Well, you seem to be doing that for a very long time, so thanks for looking after me. How long have you been doing this?" So I started a dialogue. I started to befriend this anxiety state. And so we've been doing this since you were 4 years old. I said, wow. And suddenly it came to mind that when I was 4 years old, my parents I was born in Holland, post-war Europe. Holland was a mess. My parents decided to leave Holland and move to Australia, where life potential was much better. Mm-hmm. So as a 4-year-old, I moved from everything I knew, the language I knew, to somewhere I knew nobody and didn't understand the language. Now, to a 4-year-old, that's pretty scary. I mean, my parents were not that they weren't supportive, but wow, what's happened here? So I picked the fact that went back when my chronic anxiety state first kicked in. Right? So I said, "Well, thank you for looking after me all that time since I was 4 years old. You must be really tired." They said, "Yeah, we are very tired." I said, "Oh, well, would you like a holiday?" "That'd be great." So it's like you befriend these states as if they were people, personalities. Yeah. Right?
So you talk to yourself, and address your own mind with different parts of your mind talking to one another.
Yeah, and you start, and when you do this, because NLP teaches us to do that in a particular way, but yes, you just talk to yourself effectively. Yeah. Now, as they say, talking to yourself is not a good thing, but in fact, it's a very healthy thing when you know how to do it. Right?
Yes.
There's functional talking, there's dysfunctional talking. Right? Well, this was a good functional one. Yeah. Anyway, I said, "Would you like a holiday?" And they said, "Oh, that'd be great." I said, "What? Would you like to go now?" They said, "Oh, no, we can't go now. You might still need us." Yeah. I said, "Well, look, I'm an adult now. I'm much more resourceful. I've learned many more things. There's nothing to be anxious about here. I don't actually need you right at the moment, so you can go on a holiday for a while." I said, "Oh, great." "Oh, no, we can't really go because you still might need us fairly soon." See, they're very concerned about me. Right? I said, "Well, that's true. I could need you tomorrow, or maybe later this afternoon, or maybe in a week's time. That's true. I never know what's going to happen. But how about," and this was the days before cell phones, before any of that sort of stuff, so it was a long time ago. I said, "How about," and digital pages were just coming up with people, beep, 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 right? So I said, how about I give you a pager, and I'll page you if I need you." "Oh, great idea," they said. No, the battery might go flat." I said, "Well, that's true too. So how about I put a brand new Energizer battery in, because that'll last for 18 months in these pages. And if I won't need you, I won't call you, but you can come back and check on me in a year's time and see how I'm going, if I need you." So all requirements were met. And I said, "Yeah, great. we'll go on a holiday. So thanks. You can go, if you want, you can go right now. Nothing to stop you. So fine, see you later. And the tummy relaxed, the internal stopped. So our taste changed instantly.
It's crazy,
Instantly.
eh?
Oh, it's amazing.
Like
The
you
whole
talk about it, and then somebody listening to this right now is, that's crazy. Why would you talk to yourself? Like, this is so silly. You know, it never in a million year would work to address any issue that's ongoing within yourself, you know. But
That's
it
right.
did, right? So
That's right. And the interesting thing is every year on the 26th of March, it comes back.
Okay.
As per agreement. And I feel it come back. And I say, hi, guys, how's your holiday? Oh, we're having a great time. I said, well, I don't need you. Nothing's happening. It's all right. All very well. I said, okay. Off we go. Every year. This year, no, last year in 2020, came back on the 26th of March, the day the Philippines said they're going to go in lockdown for COVID. And they said, are you okay? I said, I'm fine. I said, sure. They said, COVID's coming. I said, I know that. I've got it covered. We'll be fine. If I need you, I can call you. It's okay. It's off the wind again. So because, you know, I mean, this chronic anxiety state is a part of you. So it knows exactly what's going on in the world, like I do, as much as I do, if not more, in fact. So it's fascinating. It does check in the other day some little time ago, it came back just briefly because it realized there were some things, particularly financial, was a bit of a concern because, you know, when you can't work and your family can't work and all those sorts of things, there's anxiety there. And it came back to check on me. I said, no, it's okay. I've got the finances in hand. In fact, I'm doing quite well because I'm working online with people all over the world, which I hadn't done before. So that was a whole new scenario that they weren't aware of.
Exactly.
So yeah, it was fascinating. That was that, and then of course that propelled me into I was so intrigued by that and the rest of the program that propelled me then into the master practitioner level, and then the process from then, of course, to start actually playing with it, exploring it, working with people bit by bit, and getting more and more. It was quite a playful process to start actually becoming an actual practitioner, because that's the whole, you know, actually learning the stuff and applying it are two different steps of the process. Yeah,
of course.
Yeah.
So if we talk about it and the way it works, could you like maybe summarize it in terms of how does it work to program a person to change their thoughts so they change how they feel or how they act, or can you walk through a process with us?
Yeah. The first, again, a bit of background with NLP here to explain a bit why it works so well.
Yeah.
And to even predate that, historically, back from the 400 years ago, there's a French philosopher called Descartes, and he developed something called Cartesian psychology or Cartesian philosophy. Okay. And he determined back then, 400 years ago, that the mind and the body were separate. Mm-hmm. And that's played out for centuries, so the physicians look after the physical body. But they had really no idea what to do with the mind. Mm-hmm. And that still plays out today in a sense that physicians still look after the physical body. They still don't worry about the mental processes going on. Mm-hmm. But in the 60s and 70s last century, NLP guys, they discovered something quite amazing. They discovered that every behavior, whether it's an emotion, whether it's an activity, whether it's a disease, doesn't matter. Every behavior is an amalgam of both cognitive processes and physiological processes. It's a structural amalgam. So when one changes, the other changes. It's a structural dynamic. So, and there's at least 3 sensory systems involved, probably all 5, because we've got 5 senses. But the predominant ones we work with are the internal visuals, because when I was telling that story, you would have had an image in your mind of this lady I was working with walking along the path, me talking to myself, a little image in your mind. I was working with the internal dialogue part of that and the feelings when I was doing it myself, right? So I was working with two sensory systems. Now, what they discovered also is that to help a person change a particular concerning behavior or pattern, it's all virtually impossible to change it in the sensory system that you're conscious of.
Okay.
Because if you could, you just do it. You just change your internal dialogue. Yep. Now, they try that with affirmations, and they work to a degree. But often you stop your affirmations, the old internal dialogue comes back up again.
Exactly.
Or you could, if you, I don't want to feel like this, then they'll say, oh, I'll feel different. Well, again, you might smile for a while and feel different for a while. But again, when you stop doing that consciously by willpower, the old motions, the old feelings keep coming up. Right? So you need to get to in those cases where you're aware of the internal dialogue and the feelings, you've got to get to the visual, change the visuals. So whichever sensory system's not in your conscious awareness is the one you need to access and change. So NLP teaches us to recognize which sensory systems are consciously available to the person. Therefore, which sensory system you need to help them move into to make that change.
Okay.
Now, I'll give you a story of an example of how that worked so profoundly powerfully. It was quite a while ago. It was in my earlier years when I was still developing this actual quantum healing process. And a woman came to me on 5:30 on a Friday afternoon. The timing's important. After work, she worked in a real estate agent. I never met her before. She came as a referral. And she was very angry, not with me because she didn't know me, but very angry and frustrated and, really in this state of annoyance. Yeah. So she was really aware of her feelings and emotions and all that sort of stuff. And I said, well, what's going on? And she said, I work in this real estate office and I'm not treated very well. And there's no career path for me and I'm not validated. And there's probably a bit of sexual harassment going on before all the Me Too days, like it's a long time ago. I mean, she didn't actually say there was, but in hindsight, there could have been. And she spent about 40 minutes letting all this stuff out. So with NLP, as the founder of NLP, Richard Bandler says, 80% of your time is spent in gathering information from the person. So she spent 40 minutes talking and 2 bits of information came up that I red flagged as important.
Yeah.
About halfway through the discussion, or her talking was a monologue more, she mentioned that when she was about 34 years old now, when she was 17, she'd been diagnosed with a medical condition she'd never be able to have children. But she said she'd come to terms with it, and I guess that's probably true 17 years later. Let's hope so. And then she talked a bit more, and then as she was starting to relax a little bit more after all the talking of the stuff at the office coming out, like it was a venting, like a volcano spewing all the stuff out. And you sort of just let it all happen for a while.
Of course.
Till the energy comes down a bit. And then she said, interestingly, she said, Dick, she said, I feel like I'm hitting my head against a brick wall. Now, have you ever heard that statement?
Yes.
Yep, it's very common in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
So I said to her, now that what she said then is called a metaphor of the mind, because she's not hitting her head against a brick wall, or she's hitting my office talking to me. Yeah. So it's not an actual reality, it's an internal metaphor. Mm-hmm. So I said to her, this brick wall you're hitting your head against, what are the bricks like? She looked at me puzzled. I said, well, just close your eyes if it helps. And just tell me, what are the color of the bricks?
Yeah.
Now, by asking that question, she has to go to visual.
Yeah, she's changing, she's switching.
She's going from kinesthetics and feelings and sensations and internal dialogue coming out of her mouth as external dialogue to visual. And she says, I said, and keep your eyes closed, it's easier. She said, they're yellow. I said, like the yellow built house bricks we have here in Australia. Not all houses are yellow, but many are. Yeah, she's just like yellow house bricks. Now, this is the bit that's interesting. And I'll talk about this in more detail, but this is what I said to her. I said, just thank the brick wall for letting you know it's made of yellow bricks. She sat back in surprise, still eyes closed. I said, what happened? She said, when I thanked it, the brick wall fell over. I said, that's right. Now thank it for falling over. What happened? She shook again. She said, it's broken into rubble. I said, that's right. I said, thank it for breaking into rubble. What happens then? Oh, it's broken into small bits like aggregate. Now, aggregates are stones about this big they use in road building. Mm-hmm. And being in real estate, she understood aggregate. Oh, so that's good. So thank you for breaking into aggregate, down to aggregate size. What happens? It's forming into pebbles. Mm-hmm. Thank you for forming into pebbles. Oh, it's forming a pathway. Thank you for forming a pathway. Oh, the pathway is winding through green fields. Thank you for winding through green fields. Oh, there's trees on both sides of the field. Thank for the trees, the pathway winding between trees through the green fields. Oh, it's going up a slight hill. Thank you for going up a slight hill. Oh, I'm going up the hill. Good. And what happens when you get to the top of the hill? And this time her face is beaming, all that anger's gone, all that frustration's gone. Like the process just relaxed. So I'm standing on the top of a hill looking at a beautiful sunrise. It's a new day. A new beginning. That's right. Then she opened her eyes, really relaxed, and said, "Gee, thanks very much, Dick. I don't know what you did, but I feel so different." I said, "Would you like to do some more right now? Or you want to sit with this for a while? You know, let this sit there for a while, be with it for a while, just notice what happens." You know, I think I've done what I need to do. I've got a new perspective on life, from hitting my head against a brick wall and frustration to a new day, a new beginning, a new sunrise. It's okay. Well, you know where I am, and I'd appreciate some feedback if something significant changes. And off she went, paid me my fee, and off she went. The whole session took an hour, 45 minutes of information gathering, 10 minutes of 10 minutes or so of processing and talking, and off she went.
Okay.
Interesting enough, on Tuesday she rang me and said, "Dick, thanks ever so much for that session. On Saturday, I resigned from, that's the next day, I resigned from my job. On Monday, yesterday, now I'm going to talk to you, yes, on Monday, I got a new job. That's great. It's such a different job. People are really nice. They're really validating me and supporting me, and there's a career path. It's wonderful. It's just what I wanted." I said, "Well, congratulations. I guess you won't be needing me again." She said, "No, probably not, but if anything else happens, I'll let you know." It's okay. And 6 months later, I got a phone call. I wasn't home at the time. My partner took the call and said, just tell Dick again, thanks very, very much. And just let him know I'm now 3 months happily pregnant.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, whether what we did made that possible, I have no scientific basis for that claim. I wouldn't claim that. But certainly the change of attitude, the change of perception, the change of the metaphor from hitting head against a brick wall to a new day, a new dawn, a new beginning, gave her a whole different mindset to resign from work, get a job, and move on. Right? And that's called a metaphor of the mind update. Now, as a takeout from this for people to do themselves, what I discovered, not only from that process, but most processes, that anything that distresses us is unprocessed stuff, whatever that stuff is, unprocessed. Because in our lives, we take in information all the time. Right? And everything we take in has to be processed through and become a past event. Right? Yep. Now, a lot of people don't process effectively because their processing has been inhibited. A big trauma will put us into shock as a protection first. And then after we get over our shock, then we need to process. Yeah. And unfortunately, there are many inhibitors in our culture, in our families, in our religions. And there is good stuff in many religions, but there's also inhibitory stuff as well. Inhibit our processing. And also we've never been taught what processing is. So our conscious mind has no idea what we're supposed to do in these situations. Right? So what I discovered is that when we notice without judgment, because when we know, just to ask her to notice what the brick wall did, it fell over. She didn't make it fall over. It wasn't a conscious will effort. It just fell over. And she was as surprised as anything that happened. Right? When we thank whatever we notice of unprocessed stuff, it changes. Now, not necessarily noticeably necessary, sometimes very subtle. It might not, and that particular process took, I don't know, let's say 10, 12 steps overall from brick wall to sunrise. Sometimes it's many more steps, sometimes it's fewer. Right? Because that's the magic of our system. It knows exactly how many steps need to be taken to get to resolution. Now, of course, if it's a complex thing, it takes more steps. It's got more elements to it, right? So a takeout from this, one takeout, is that whenever we notice something, and we need to notice it with a suspension of judgment, just noticing with curiosity and interest. Oh, that's what's going on in my mind. This is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm feeling in my body. Then we thank that which we notice. because it's really a signal to us that we're out of harmony, out of balance. We're not at ease. And when you thank it, there's automatically a change, because that thank you is an expression of love and gratitude to your body, to your system, to your signaling system. And Bruce Lipton, who I'm not sure if you know of him, but he's an geneticist, whatever he is. Okay. He discovered that, amongst other things, that our genetics do not determine our lives. Our genetics respond to the environment. So if you change the mental environment, physiology changes. If you change your internal perception from a brick wall to a sunrise, it changes your body biochemistry.
Yeah.
Right? Which you then feel as, sometimes you feel that as a flush of energy, sometimes you feel that as like electricity, sometimes you just feel your muscles relax, like all different ways the body experiences that. Sometimes subtle, sometimes quite significant. So and in that particular process of the lady with the brick wall, I simply got her to notice what happened when she thanked, then thank that which happened, knows what happened as a result of that. They kept thanking and noticing, thanking and noticing. At no stage did I in any time, nor did she, determine what was meant to happen. That all came from inside her. So her own inner system processed to resolution. All I did was facilitate. Yep. I didn't direct. There's no direction. There's no suggestion. It was simply facilitating. So my work is mainly facilitating people getting in touch with what's going on in here and in here, to facilitate them to process the unprocessed stuff. Yeah. Now that's a bit beyond NLP. NLP works in slightly different ways, but I use the NLP skills, techniques, and language patterns, because there's linguistic, remember, language patterns, to facilitate that process. Right.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's very interesting, because what you touched on is something that I've done before, and it worked, and I didn't really know why, but I was doing it. So, when you're lying down at night and you're having all those thoughts and they spin, and like either work that you have to address, things that are like projects that you want to finish, and you're thinking and thinking and thinking. So you have a hard time getting to sleep. And one thing that I started doing is addressing my mind like I'm talking to somebody else. So Correct. I would be like, hey, I noticed you're trying to bring awareness to this project and this and that. Thank you for that. But I'm trying to sleep right now. Is there anything we can do in regards to this right now? So I'm talking to myself, and then my mind will reply back, well, no, you're going to bed. We can't do anything right now. And then I'll go back and say, okay, well, thank you so much for bringing awareness to this. And why don't we just go to bed so I can be more rested and address those issues tomorrow? And then my mind will say, yeah, good idea, right? So then I will be, all right, is there anything else you want to bring to my attention right now? No? Boom. And I address the issue. And the moment I do that, usually my mind stops racing, and then I drift to sleep.
That's right.
Exactly. I've used that many times, like a few nights I've done that, and it works. And I didn't know why it works, because it sounds so stupid. But, it does work, because you're addressing your own mind. And like you said, it's the things that are unprocessed that are dragging and, creating all sort of physiological response within your body and mind. And this is why it's amazing what you do.
Yeah. The thing is, you're actually a natural in a sense, right? Just intuitively you did this, even though it sounded crazy, or thought it was a bit crazy.
I didn't know what I was doing, but I tried it.
And it worked. But the thing is, that doesn't mean you actually process the stuff at the time. You put it off till the next day. We can also do that, right? It doesn't always have to be processed in the moment. But the other thing that's important to know is that when we're sleeping, we also process. In fact, our sleep is a time of processing. If I can just ask you, just close your eyes for one moment. Just close your eyes right now. And when you just be aware of your eyes, what do you notice your eyes are doing right at this moment?
They're moving.
Correct. You know what that's called?
Rapid eye movement.
Correct. Very good. You can open them now. That's fine. And I could see that quite clearly, because your eyelids are moving, and the listeners would, or the watchers will also see that happening. So as soon as your eyes close, if there's unprocessed stuff, your eyes start doing rapid eye movement automatically. with no effort.
Wow.
Right? Our fastest natural processing system, and there are many processing systems, is rapid eye movement.
Okay.
And there are reasons the fast. I won't go into those details here. That will take too long. But it's a very important thing for us to know. And so when you go to sleep, during sleep, you do about 2 hours of REM, 2 hours of rapid eye movement, which is called REM, right? But we've discovered that 2 hours in 24 is not actually enough to process everything that we take in these days. There's so much information from so many directions. So we need about one period of time in 12. Sorry. One period of time. Sorry. 2 hours night of sleep is one period of time in 24. 2 period of time in 24 is one period of time in 12. We need one period of time in 7 to actually process. Okay. Which means we need about another hour and a half during non-sleeping time to do REM. And how do we do that in our life today? Not much, right? Now, historically,
doesn't happen quite often, no.
Exactly. Now, historically, that was our siesta time in many countries. Or is when you go to church and close your eyes to pray. But don't worry, it doesn't matter whether you're praying or not. As soon as you close your eyes, they will automatically go into REM. Or sometimes people now do a power nap. Or if you're getting older like me, a nana nap. Doesn't matter, right? So I've made sure that I do plenty of REM these days because I'm not doing a lot of external input from the sort of the distraction world, but I'm doing a lot of input from people I'm working with when I'm working with clients. I've got to process every time I work with someone. I've got to process their stuff as well, not their distress, but everything I've learned from them. And check if I've done and ask my being to come up with other things that might be useful next time we talk, stuff like that. Okay. So the rapid eye movement is so important. Now, to again put that in perspective, I had a mother bring her 17-year-old son to me, who was a nice kid, not a social problem, but he was just having so much difficulty with schoolwork, and he's really distracted, and he couldn't get his head around it and stuff like that. And so she sent him, and he came by himself. 17, he's old enough to come by himself. And I greeted him and said, look, if you don't mind, just sit in that chair over there and just close your eyes and notice what happens. And the same with him. They started moving, and he noticed that. I said, that's right. I said, that's rapid eye movement. Explained to him the same as I just explained to you. I said, now just sit there and close your eyes and stay there with your eyes closed till your eyes have finished REMing what they need to REM right now in this time you have with me. And while you're sitting there doing that, I'll be doing some work over here. I'll be in the room. And when you're ready, your eyes will open naturally. You'll feel refreshed and relaxed. So
without doing nothing, just sitting there.
Just REMing. So I was just doing things, no phone calls, all very quiet.
Okay.
And I mean, not that I would have stopped phone calls, it wouldn't matter, but none actually came in. Anyway, 20 minutes later, his eyes opened up. He said, what's happened? My mind's gone quiet. I feel relaxed. He said, that's amazing. I said, that's right. And I explained, you had a backlog of REM, right? Because you're not doing enough every day. So all you need to do, and this is the only intervention I did with him, all you need to do is every day do some REM. That was school holidays, so he didn't have to go to school, but he had school projects to do. Okay. I said, and during the day, while you're at home, just lie, you can lie down, sit down. There's no particular body posture you have to take, like supposedly in meditation. None of that's important. And just as long as you do your household chores that are required for your mother, rest of the time, just REM and notice what happens. Right? So he says, you mean I can goof off every day? I said, you can goof off every day. Goof off, lying back and doing nothing. So anyway, 3 days later, 4 days later, his mother rang me and said, Dick, I don't know what you did with him, but he's a changed boy. He's now back and doing his project for his school. He's got to prepare for school. He's much more much more with it. He's actually present when he's talking to us. He's not getting all stressed. It's really great. I said, and his younger sister, who's 13, said to me, the mother said, whatever whatever Dick did to my brother, I want that too. So she brought the sister in, who's 13. Now, 13-year-old girl, it's best if I'm not in the room alone, so I invited the mother to stay there with me.
Yeah.
It's not such an issue then as it is now, but historically we know it was an issue, but not personally, but yeah. So anyway, so the mother also then learnt the process and understood what was going on. And the feedback was that they didn't need to see me anymore because they didn't have any trauma to process. They just had unprocessed stuff to process because nobody had taught them how to process. So that's the only intervention. So the second takeout is do as much REM time as you can. And if you like meditating is REM.
That's why it's beneficial.
Yeah, it happens automatically.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're closing your eyes.
Yeah.
Now, if you're going to do REM for processing, it's best not to have guided meditations because the guided meditation just puts more stuff in to process while you're meditating.
Okay, so setting in silence, closing your eyes, letting your eyes vibrate or move until you're done.
And if stuff comes to awareness, such as thoughts, like you do, you thank it.
Yeah.
And you don't have to necessarily have a conversation. Just the thanking is enough to let it process through. Now, there's lots more, of course, that can often needs to be done when there's historical trauma. There's all sorts of other issues. But this was a young teenage boys, and I did a similar one with a 13-year-old recently in India on just talking to a mother, told the mother's story, and she took him through it and got the same results. Like it just processed, unprocessed stuff. Now, how do we know when we need to REM? That's the other important thing to know, right?
Yeah.
And there are indicators. When your eyes feel heavy, time to REM. When you're reading and you don't remember the last two sentences, you realize, I can't remember what I read, time to REM, right? When you're feeling sleepy, just lie down, close your eyes, you either go to sleep or just REM. When you're agitated, distressed, or irritated, time to REM. Although you also need to make sure you're not hungry and you're not fatigued, though fatigue can prevent you, is often caused by unprocessed stuff, so the REMing is still important as well, right? But also you need to make sure you're not hungry, because sometimes hunger can make you less resourceful and irritable. So pay attention to those too. So 3 takeouts: REM as much as you can, knowing when to REM is the second thing, and your eyes will tell you that. When you've got to pay attention to your eyes, though, of course, to do that.
Yeah.
Right? You've got to have your conscious mind noticing what's going on. And the other thing is to thank that which you notice. So there's three very simple takeouts from this particular
technique. That's our process. Yeah, that's really good for our listeners back home.
Yeah.
So to take the time to REM anytime that they feel those symptoms coming up, or like you said, they feel tired, their eyes are heavy, or they can't, they lose their focus, they can't remember what they're working on or reading or whatever. Just to close the eyes, right? They close their eyes, the eyes will be moving, and when they stop moving, it means, okay, you can open them back up, right?
Yeah, but they may not notice their REMing because it happens so naturally, so automatically, people often don't notice it.
Well, I was noticing mine really quickly.
Well, yours are moving quite a lot. Sometimes it starts very subtly. Yeah. The other thing is, don't do it while you're driving a car.
Yeah, that's a good advice. Okay, all right. So that's one process of NLP that people can do better.
Well, actually, the REMing is not formally taught in NLP. That's something I discovered as part of my quantum healing evolution.
Okay.
But the reason for the REMing is that, like, if I ask you a question, what did you have for breakfast yesterday? Do you remember?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember what you had there? You remember what you had for dinner 2 days ago?
No.
If you could remember, what would it be?
2 days
stop
ago
there.
for
Stop.
dinner. Yeah.
Do you know what your eyes did?
They look up left or up right.
That's right.
Up left, right. I think.
Well, they went both actually, right? Oh. So when we ask a person a question, or when we're talking and need to get more information from our brain, our eyes go to different places in our eye orbs, right? And each particular direction the eyes go is the neurology of the body accessing different types of information.
Okay.
Right. Some's visual, some's auditory, some's feelings and sensations, some smells and tastes, and some's internal dialogue. When I asked you the first question, your eyes went down to check if it was right and went to internal dialogue, because you asked yourself, was that right? that question about the breakfast.
Yeah.
You said you knew it, then you went, yep, that's right, went straight down there, right? You actually had a little chat to yourself. Your eyes went to internal dialogue sector of your eye map. Right?
Huh.
Now, when you know these sectors, that also gives a facilitator a lot of information. That doesn't mean everybody's eye map's normally organized either, by the way. That's another story. But when you're REMing, your eyes are going to all these sectors very, very fast as the neurology accesses all the information. The eyes are directly linked to the neurology of the brain.
And that's
So
subconsciously, right? So you might not be aware of what you're thinking
absolutely.
Okay.
And also when you're talking, you're looking away every now and then. You watch people on the news talking. Newsreaders don't, because they've got a teleprompter to read. But when they're naturally talking, they're looking away and thinking like that. It's quite normal. Okay. Now, what happens with children in school, and a child decides, and so, because another way of processing, if you can't do REM because you've got to be looking at the teacher or listening openly, awake, supposedly. So for a child, then they might go into a daydream, and they'll usually look up as they're daydreaming because they're going into visual mode, which is usually up there. So if they're daydreaming and the teacher sees them daydreaming and says, stop daydreaming, pay attention.
Yeah.
Then through no ill intent on the teacher's part, that teacher's at that moment stopped that child from processing, stopped their learning process. And if that's happens often enough, that child automatically over time stops using that processing system. And of course, in the classroom, rapid eye movement is not available most of the time. So they've got to go to a secondary processing system. Yeah. Other children, when they're listening to a teacher or watching or whatever's going on, they might be jiggling their knee or doodling. And that's called physiological or kinesthetic processing. And if the teacher says, stop fidgeting for goodness sake, that teacher inadvertently stops their processing. So in our childhood, whether it's before school, at school, other times, if any of our natural automatic behaviors are judged and the child doesn't know, the child doesn't know why they're daydreaming, they don't consciously know why they're fidgeting, none of that sort of stuff. So the child starts stopping processing. So it's no wonder we've got unprocessed stuff. Because our natural processing systems have been inhibited through no ill intent, simply through ignorance. Right? Okay. Another takeout for parents, particularly, and teachers, is when a child is daydreaming, let them daydream and give them time to finish their daydream, so they'll come back and they'll give you the answer, or they'll understand what you've been talking about. Or if they don't, they'll ask a question. Or if they're fidgeting, or their knees are jiggling, whatever it is, or whatever, that's their system processing. Now, that's very hard for a teacher who is a visual inputter that distracts a teacher. So the teacher finds that really hard initially till they learn that child needs to do that. Right? Okay. So there's so many bits I could go into, many things, but it's another useful takeaway. When a child goes into those states, they're actually processing. I've got an 11-year-old son. I'm a late starter in the family planning business, but he said to me the other day, because I was working with him because he's not at school, they're doing school modules and all sorts of stuff here at home, and I was getting a bit impatient because I knew what the answer was. Why didn't he? And he got upset. He said, "Daddy, when you talk to me, you stop me processing in here." Oh, thank you. So he's been listening to me, right? So he already knows how his brain works, and I said, thanks for reminding me. Of course, I need to give you time to process. And I was inhibiting his process. And that was not serving him. So my impatience was not serving his learning process. Okay. Now, when we say something out of our mouths, we've already processed that. So it just comes out. But the listener has to process what we've said. Yeah. Right? Definitely. And if we don't give them time to process that, and they don't understand you, we leave them behind. We leave them behind. Exactly. Yeah. And that's very important for particularly teachers and parents, but particularly in a formal learning environment, it's very important. And what I do now when I'm doing my trainings, I always finish every session with a 5-minute closed eye processing time to allow the brain to process what we've covered in that last hour or so. And I think if every classroom at school did that, knowing exactly how to word that invitation to process, allowing the children to process information, those children take on board that information much more quickly, much more effortlessly, much more with understanding rather than just rote parroting out the information. They actually understand the information.
Mhm. Definitely. So if we take an example, something just simple as, let's say, somebody who wants to stop smoking cigarettes, so they want to quit cigarette. How would NLP work in terms of, let's say I'm a client coming to you, I want to stop smoking. So for our listeners to understand more how the mind and the language you put into connects everything together, so they have a better understanding at how NLP can help them and have a little bit more awareness as to what it is and how it works in depth, or maybe just with that example. So could we use that? Could we try that?
Well, smoking is quite complex because it also includes the intake of chemicals, addictive chemicals.
Okay.
Right. So you need to. The fascinating thing is the body has its own pharmacology, right? Yep. So the body can actually mimic and create the chemicals that you crave from the cigarettes or any other addictive substance, in fact, right? So the process needs to include the physiological requirements that the smoking satisfies at that sort of chemical level. It also has to address the original reason to take up smoking. Now, if it was just for pleasure and not as a crutch or self-medication, there'd be a different process, right? You then also have to make sure that, because sometimes smoking is triggered by a social context, right? So if you're in the local hotel having a few drinks with friends and somebody strikes up a cigarette and you're a recovering smoker, you'll be tempted to, so you've got to give the physiology an alternate behavior to do in that moment as well. So it's quite a complex process, the smoking thing. I don't tend to focus on that because by the time people come to me, that's no longer an issue, generally speaking. Okay. But there are people who do some really good work with and they actually focus on that particular issue because it's a big issue. It's actually almost as big a market for them as the tobacco market is for the cigarette producers. Yeah. So, but that's actually quite complex. But even just by thanking your conscious mind for knowing that you don't want to smoke anymore, and thanking the lungs for letting you know now I would like to breathe clean, fresh air, and inviting your body to make the biochemistry changes requiring to satisfy those needs that smoking satisfies, do it in its own way, that would be a good start, right? Because mostly people are judging themselves if by the time they want to give up smoking, they're judging that whole thing rather than just thanking the body for letting them know. And then just inviting their body to make whatever adjustments it needs to make. Now that's at a first simplistic level a good start. Now for some people that will work like a treat. Okay. For others that won't be sufficient depending on the underlying factors that might be behind that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. But all work I do, I start with noticing and thanking because that brings out the noticing and thanking actually brings out the underlying information. Right. Now that's more easily facilitated by another person initially to get used to doing it for yourself. But you can do it for yourself. Yeah.
Okay. And in working with clients, what do you quite often see that is I guess the main problem in sabotaging their own efforts to fix a situation?
Well, sometimes they're not resourceful enough. They don't have enough resources. In my quantum process, I actually start off by, apart from noticing and thanking, I start off by helping them access some inner resources their physiology already has, such as the inner healer. So, because they understand the body can heal itself, so they can understand that there must be something going on today. That sort of makes some sense to them. But there are 6 others that we get together. And sometimes those 7 resources are sufficient to address many things. Now, NLP usually starts, in a pure NLP sense, helping the person discover what the actual issue is, and then asking what resource they need to resolve that. And it might be confidence, it might be motivation, it might be empathy, it might be a whole bunch either. And you can actually invite the neurology to activate that resource which is already in you. and then invite that resource to address that particular issue at a fairly simplistic level, right? So we don't do that. We start with 7 resources that can do lots of stuff.
Okay.
Right? Okay. To me, it seems far more beneficial to have a bunch of resources already available if something comes up.
Okay.
So back to your question, because I went a bit of a side.
Yeah, my question was, what do you notice in terms of the clients you work with that they quite often do to sabotage their own efforts of achieving either the goals, the desired results, or what they need to address? Okay,
so sometimes people call putting things off as a sabotage. What's the word for putting things off?
Procrastinating.
That's the one. Very good. So I'm just making sure you knew it. Procrastination, right?
Yeah.
Now, to me, procrastination, I've made it into a resource. So I don't judge it anymore, right? So the first thing is actually to notice those things that we're doing. I'm procrastinating. So I said, okay, why am I procrastinating?
Yeah. Why are you putting it to later and not doing it or addressing it?
And my procrastinator gives me the answer. It says you don't have enough knowledge, skills, or resources yet to do this particular activity. So you need to go and learn something, practice something, get some skills up. Then you can do it. Or you don't have enough information. You need to go and do some research. So the procrastinator actually is a high-level resource when you befriend it. It's like the anxiety state. When I befriended it, it changed. When I befriended my procrastinator, it changed. Right? The other thing procrastination I've discovered is also it has some sense of knowing, interestingly enough, that sometimes that which you supposedly think you're supposed to do, by the time comes by when you should have done it, it's not needed anymore. Things have changed. So it's just as well you didn't do it. It's not required, right? So the procrastinator, so often the timing isn't right. So there's many things the procrastinator looks after when you befriend it. The other, so some people call their procrastinators a saboteur. To me, it's a resource. So I change my sabotaging type things, find out what the purpose of that particular saboteur is. The other thing, so in that way, it's need more resources. The procrastinator, we need other resources to make it possible. Or the timing's not right, they don't actually need to do it at all.
Yeah.
But the other thing is their internal beliefs they have about their capabilities, their self-image, their self-worth, all those sorts of things. They're the other major impediment to most people. Now, some of those come from their childhood. Some of those come from a traumatic event. Some of those come simply from watching how life is in the environment they grew up in. And if they grew up in a poor neighborhood and money was always a problem and there was always arguments about money because there wasn't enough, then that's how life is. They've got this subconscious setup. That's how life is. And they don't know any different. And of course, as a child, you don't know any different. But as you get older and you start to see, well, there is a different reality over there. Why am I living in this reality when that reality is over there? Right? And unless they update some programs that maintains that reality for them, they can't get over there. Now, it might be just a simple thing by updating the thought, well, actually, I can have that reality if I want to. I can't have that, I can have that. It might be just that, and something simply just thanking it just updates it from what it was to what it can be. Okay. Now, I'm making it sound all very simple.
Yeah. The
steps are simple, but sometimes there's there can be a cluster of beliefs. It might just not be the one belief. So you've got to deal with a cluster of beliefs. Sometimes it's like a self-image. That's quite interesting too. And when you start working with people, you'll come across a part of themselves that's still a little girl or a little boy. Yeah. Frightened, unsure. So then we need some healing love from the now adult to go the little boy or girl. Right. And when that happens, when you love the little boy, the little girl, they respond. In here, of course. Yeah. It's a metaphor, but it's still real because the brain thinks in metaphors. So when you get the metaphor, the little boy, little girl, and you'll see them in their mind, they'll see them growing up and getting stronger and bigger and being reintegrated into the adult they are now, while maintaining the capability of having fun and joy that little children do have. Right? And healing the traumas that cause them to stay that little frightened child. or that little uncertain child. I had one person the other day in a particular program, and we weren't addressing that specifically, but in the process, he said, "Oh, my little girl came home at last." And she now acts where before in certain situations she would have been triggered into childhood mode or childish mode. She now could respond as an adult automatically because that internal representation had updated.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's usually beliefs and self-image type factors that have not been processed when they were younger.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if we talk about habits or tricks or tips that our audience could apply to their day-to-day life right now, and noticing that the mind's connected with the body and our thoughts are connected with our neurons, and we can go back and forth and address those, what are your suggestions that people can take right away into their life, either in forms of habits, routines, tips, tricks that you might want to share with our audience?
Well, the first thing is to actually notice the habits.
Yeah. Okay.
A lot are so habitual we don't even notice them. That's the first thing. Then the second thing is when we notice the habits, just thank them for letting us know they're there. So we actually start a dialogue with them, in a sense, a conversation with them. It doesn't have to be a dialogue, but we start a communication with them. Right? And then sometimes just by doing that, the habit will say, "Oh, well, I don't really want to do this. So what would you like to do instead?" "Well, let's do this instead." One lady, she came to me, she said, "Look, Dick, I just can't stop eating chocolate eclairs."
Okay.
I can understand that, by the way, but anyway. But the trouble was having issues for her health.
Yes.
So I simply said to her, "When you think of a chocolate eclair, what's the picture in your mind like?" She said, "It's this big right there." Like it's compelling.
Yeah.
Rah, 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 rah.
Yeah.
I said, "Okay, well, just thank the chocolate eclair for being so compelling that you just want it so much, and thank it for having been in your life for so long." And what happens? He says, "Oh, it changed to an apple." Well, thank the apple and ask the apple if it's willing to replace the chocolate eclair for your snack. Yes. And from that moment, she changed from eclair to apple.
It's crazy that happens just like that, right? It's just inside your mind. The power of the mind is incredible. I've always been fascinated by neurology
absolutely. But the thing is, because I believe we live what I call a free will planet.
Yes.
We, as a conscious entity living in this body, have the free will to have whatever life we choose. But we've been brought up in a culture or an environment where we only know this particular life and all those beliefs and all those values and all those setups that's in this physiology as we become older, as adults. And some of that serves us and some of it doesn't. And somewhere this woman learned to really love chocolate eclairs. And they're very tasty, and I can understand that, particularly if they've got real cream in them. Right? I understand all that. But I also, in the past, would have eaten chocolate eclairs, but I also now go for an apple after I did that process with her. My system updated at exactly the same time. But anyway, the thing is, because it's a free will planet, it's up to our conscious awareness with free will to decide whether we want to change this habit or not. We've got to have the willingness. We don't have to do it by free will, but we have to have the willingness, the agreement, the decision that we want to change this behavior. Right?
Yes.
So the first step is to notice it. The second step is not to judge it, but to simply, this is what my program that's running at the subconscious. So the conscious mind starts to notice the subconscious programs.
Yeah.
And then by thanking it, and just by having a little dialogue, like without judgment, thanks for doing that. Similar dialogue that I just had with my internal dialogue and all those, similar, very similar. You just befriend it. And usually the system just updates it to a better option. Because our being, our deep internal self, that's much deeper than all that, it wants the best in all things for us. And it actually guides this process of updating. Now that's another level again, we're going down to what they call the unconscious mind, or the being, or the spirit, or the superconscious, it's not recorded, but it's that true self deep inside. But it also doesn't force us to change because it's free will. But it will nudge us, it will prompt us, it will, look, pay attention to your body, it's sick, or it's signaling through something that's not right, or your mind's going blah, 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 blah. Pay attention, notice, when you notice, thank it, then things start happening. Right?
So that's a great way to auto update your program. And that's something that people can do right away, right? You can ask yourself your own questions in regards to something. Is this serving me purpose? What would be a better way to address this? What can I replace this habit with that would serve my goal? And just by talking to yourself like that, things will come up, and you'll start to auto diagnose what needs to be done. But like you said, I think one important point, and even when you work with clients, you must tell them that all the time. Like you said, is the willingness to change. Are you willing to put in the efforts, or at least the mindset to want to change something that's not working right now or serving you purpose? And if you don't have that at least that willingness, then nothing will just happen by magic, right? That's important.
Well, there's two things. The willingness is one part.
Yeah.
And the ability is the second part.
Okay.
Right? So the first step is to be willing, because nothing will happen unless you're willing.
Yeah.
Although you might be thrust into a trauma that makes you want to be willing for things to be different. Yeah. And that happens to many people, of course. Some people call that the awakening trigger, right? Okay. But the second thing is, because I also, when I'm working with people, I ask if are they both willing, and to what degree it's capable or able to do that at this moment in time. Because sometimes an extra resource is needed before it can do it properly, or sometimes a belief needs to be updated, so that'll come to the awareness. So beliefs and resources are interactive, dynamic. They influence each other. Yeah. Because sometimes you can't update a belief till you're resourceful, and sometimes you can't access a resource till you update a belief. Right. And one woman I work with, her issue that she came with, she wanted to have a better relationship with money. Now, that's a big thing for many people on the planet today, for a better relationship with money, because there's all sorts of contamination about what money represents in people's things for all sorts of reasons. And so we worked out that her belief was that money causes problems. That was the actual belief statement, a little internal dog, money causes problems. And she worked out that came from when she grew up in Eastern Europe in the days of communism, and there was not much money, and there's always arguments between her mother and father about money, and so it caused problems. And they said that it causes problems. And in the same bit of discussion, she also mentioned she was still grieving that her mother had died a month prior to our meeting. So she was still grieving the death of her mother. And so when we did the belief update processes, which is fairly simple, just making the belief visible on a screen and thanking it for giving her, because a belief's function is to create your life experiences. That's its job.
Yeah.
Right? So every belief creates a life experience for you. So we thank the belief for creating life, and it just wouldn't update. It just softened a bit, but wouldn't update. So I said, oh, that's interesting. And this belief comes from your mother, right? She said, yes. So, well, let's go and invite your mother to come to the update. The mother's dead.
Okay.
She looked and said, okay. So we invited the deceased mother, come, like as if she's, like in her mind, she was real, right? Okay. And came and sat with us in the supposed, like a cinema. And then we invited the mother to also update the belief along with the daughter. And then it updated. So what prevented update was the deceased mother, who then had to be agreeable to, because it came from the deceased mother. So there's a lot of interaction goes on in this neurology. Now, because the young woman, of course, had the representation of that belief caused by, not caused, but came from her mother, right? So that part, that memory also had to update. And then when it updated, it was fascinating. This was fairly recently. It updated from money causes problems to opportunity. That's got nothing to do, apparently, with money, you would think. But it's far more generic. But she was very happy with that. Okay. It was really alive and bright and sparkling and strong. A week later when I saw her, no, 2 weeks later when I saw her, she said, that's interesting what we did with that belief update, Dick. She said, because she's living in Dubai, and she was she was a beautiful woman, and she was running a beauty salon type business in Dubai, and that all went down the tubes with the lockdowns and the COVID and all that sort of stuff. And she said, it's amazing. I just got this thought, I could set up a bakery. And went and found somebody who did really good baking, convinced this person to teach her particular baking techniques and products and stuff. First the person was a bit reluctant, but this young woman was very persuasive, and she's smart and all that sort of, and she got it, and she was now not quite earning quite as much in the beauty salon, but certainly there was money through opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, if we hadn't then done that belief update, it's unlikely she would have seen that opportunity to then make money. So it's all linked. She wouldn't have joined the dots, but the dots were all joined up for her in living experience. Right? Yeah.
No, that's awesome. Yeah.
It is.
It's unbelievable. It sounds so simple, but it's all the underlying that's happening that makes it possible. And why would you say that it works so well?
Well, it works well because our outer reality is created by our inner programs.
Mm-hmm.
So when you update the programs, and there are specific techniques which can take, can't explain in this brief time, and they do require very specific skill sets to do that.
Okay.
But when you do that internal representation update, like the woman with the brick wall, that was and done, changed her life. And you don't have to practice it. It just happens. When the internal change happens ecologically, which means all any sort of resistances, any objections that come up are dealt with. Like when I was doing my chronic anxiety state, I had to overcome the resistances about, no, you might need me, oh no, the battery might go flat. All those resistance, deal with those to the satisfaction of whatever's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Then when the update happens, it is instant, it holds and continues to hold. If it happens for a while and comes back, that means your system is showing you, yes, we can respond, but there's more to address to make it possible as a permanent thing.
Okay, I see.
Because some things might have quite a few things historically, or quite a few clusters, aspects that make it a cluster of things that need to happen. Now we're getting to the stage now where we can actually update a whole cluster of beliefs at once.
Wow.
But you start with doing one at a time, so the neurology and the physiology and the conscious mind gets used to the steps in the process. And then as you go further and further, you start going deeper and more thoroughly and broader and all that sort of stuff, to doing more at one time.
No, that's totally interesting. And for our audience, if anybody want to touch base with you and dive into what you have to offer in terms of services to help them with anything that they have to address, how can they reach you?
Just search for me on Facebook by my name.
Yeah.
I don't have a website.
Okay.
I'm not particularly at the moment interested in having a website.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got a person
working on it.
Well, she's considering to work on it at this stage. Because always got to be, when you do a website, I mean, it's quite for me, in my mind, it's quite complex. So many bits stuff. And that's not my work, so I've got to get somebody who'll do that in a way that suits me.
You like to keep it simple.
Well, I'm quite busy as it is, and I'm also training people what I'm doing.
Okay.
And there are certain people who want to train with me to do my quantum healing process, which is an advanced application of NLP.
Okay.
A prerequisite is they get NLP, so it's a fairly rigorous process, because this process of quantum healing is so powerful and can go to many, many different aspects of what is represented in our minds.
Yeah. And that's a system you created, the quantum healing process.
Well, I was honored to be guided to create it, shall we say.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's more of an advanced process that you've put more things and added more things to NLP to make it even more successful or efficient
and impactful as well.
And
also I've taken some of the NLP stuff to the next logical step. I mean, NLP is designed to allow practitioners to explore. It's not designed to be codified and said, this is it.
Okay.
It's a recursive process that invites you to explore and see what we can do with this and where it'll take us. So I've done mine in my particular niche, if you like. Yes. Other people have done other things with NLP in their own particular way. Some are going to, into business with it and coaching and other things and stuff like that. I've just decided to start off with what I called therapeutic interventions.
Okay.
See where that takes me, and that's just taken me on this wonderful journey. Yeah.
No, that's amazing, and it's so interesting for me to dive into this conversation with you and learn more about it. And you're also an expat, so you used to be living in Australia and now you live in the Philippines.
Mhm.
And just sidetrack to all this conversation. How was that for you moving from Australia to the Philippines? And what is an expat, if you want to just talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, an expat is a person living in a country that belongs to another country. So
Mhm,
we have Australian expats here, American expats here, people
mhm.
who come from, and are actually citizens of another country. It's very hard to
Okay.
become a citizen of the Philippines.
Okay.
But you can become a permanent resident, which I'm a permanent resident. So as a
Okay.
permanent resident, you're allowed to run businesses and things like that.
Okay.
It was interesting. I mean, it has its challenges, but like anything that's new has challenges, right? Because what you're used to is what's comfortable.
Yeah.
So what you're not used to is uncomfortable. Right? So you've got to move out of your comfort zone, as they say.
Yeah.
And but my wife did live in Australia for 7 years to learn some of our side of how it works in Australia, and she learned from that, and I'm doing it here. But what it does do, and I'm now working with people from many cultures, India, Saudi Arabia,
Mhm.
England, French, Portuguese, Swedish, which just doesn't matter. Right?
Yeah.
So once you get a sense of that, no matter what the culture, the underlying human operating system is the same.
Okay.
Their representation, how they experience it, is all individual.
Yeah.
It's like a computer, right? We're actually, if you like, as a metaphor, we're actually computers made of meat.
Yeah.
Right. Because we're inputting information, we're processing information, we're outputting information. Right.
Mhm.
So, and everybody, it's like, what's on your desktop on your computer is different from what's on my desktop on my computer.
Mhm.
Right. So that's individual. So however people experience is all individual. But underlying that, assuming they're both, let's say Windows computers, the underlying programs, the underlying operating programs are basically all the same.
Okay.
But there are also personalized programs that you've put on there, or downloaded, whatever. So that's our personal programs that are driving our desktop or what's on the screen at the time. Right?
Okay.
So in that computer analogy, our conscious awareness is our desktop of what we're paying attention to.
Mhm.
Our subconscious, which is mostly lodged in the body, the neurology, the mind, body, and emotions, that's all the programs that are running. Some are very functional. They keep us breathing. They keep our heart beating. They keep our excretory system working, all the physiological processes. That's all automatic programs.
Yeah.
Now, some get contaminated by chemicals or other things, of course. But as well as that, there's all our behavioral programs, automatic. When you first start a new skill, like riding a bike, you fall off a few times, then it becomes automatic, and you can ride around with your hands not even on the handlebars, right? Doesn't matter anymore, right? So that program is well and truly embedded. So they're all, but mostly they're subconscious. You're not thinking about riding a bike while you're doing something else. It's just the subconscious, right?
Yeah, they became subconscious once you're good at it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So we can learn new programs, we can install new programs in a sense, but we can also update programs, and that's what my work is more about, updating the programs that are not serving us any longer. They were useful at some point in the time, or they were there for a reason, and so I call it quantum healing, because we heal that which caused the original programs without necessarily having to relive the experience.
Okay.
Because some therapies are about people reliving the experience. Well, then you've got two incidents of trauma. Now, that to me doesn't make sense. One incident is sufficient, thank you very much. Right? Let's heal it without necessarily reliving it. Right?
Okay.
Now, sometimes people do drop into and relive bits of it. But overall, it's the system can heal without reliving it. And when you heal it or resolve it doesn't always be healing, it can be other things, as you develop, you start to gain the lessons and the learnings and the understandings from that experience that you can apply as wisdom in your life moving forward. Right? Or avoiding it from doing it again in the future, because you understand the patterns that caused you to do that in the first place.
Yeah. Well, this is really amazing, Dick, and I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast with us today. I really appreciate it, especially with the time frame. We're 12 hours apart from Canada here to the Philippines, so timing this together is really appreciated. And for people who wants to touch base with you and dive into either learning your process or just getting some form of help through your NLP techniques and everything that you're doing right now, Dick Harbers, you can find him on Facebook.
Also Messenger as well. If you do go there,
Yep.
just put, interested in NLP or quantum healing, either one, because I get a lot of messages and some are not the sort of messages you want.
All right. Well, that's awesome. And before we wrap this up, if you have one last thing you'd like to give to the world, to our listeners, one last thing you'd like to say that they can take home.
Well, the thing I've discovered, that the process that we use and that is, it's like a lot of teachings about self-development, even spiritual teachings. They tell us what to do, but not how to do it. And this is a process of how to do it, because we're starting to understand the operating system below the what's of things, of how it works. So we teach the how to make these changes. And we're still learning. It's still an evolving process. But I've had people come to me that have done Master Prac in NLP. And they see my stuff and they say, wow, let's go here, because this goes even further. So we're not stuck with, goodness me, they tell us what to do, but I can't seem to do it. What's wrong with you? There's nothing wrong with you. You just haven't got the knowledge. That's all. The skills. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Dick. I really appreciate it. And our listeners will certainly appreciate the conversation we went through, you and I, today. So until next time, everybody, thanks for listening to Living Better Podcast. Ciao for now.
And thank you very much. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Bye-bye.
It's been an enjoyable conversation. Thank you.